Elza reads A Game of Thrones by George Martin. Chapter 15. Sansa. Eddard Stark had left before dawn. Scepter Mordin informed Sansa as they broke their fast. "The king sent for him. Another hunter, do you believe? There are still wild Irids in these lands, I'm told." "I've never seen an Irid," Sansa said, feeding a piece of bacon to a lady under the table. The direwolf took it from her hand, as delicate as a queen. Scepter Mordin sniffed in disapproval. "A noble lady does not feed dogs at the table," she said, breaking off another piece of comb and letting the honey drip down onto her bread. "She's not a dog, she's a direwolf," Sansa pointed out as Lady licked her fingers with a rough tongue. "Anyway, father said we could keep them with us if you want." The scepter was not appeased. "You're a good girl, Sansa, but I do vow when it comes to that creature you're as willful as your sister Ira," she scolded. "And where is Ira this morning?" "She wasn't hungry," Sansa said, knowing full well that her sister had probably stolen down to the kitchen hours ago and wheedled her breakfast out of some cook's boy. "Do remind her to dress nicely today. The grey velvet, perhaps. We're all invited to ride with the Queen and Princess Myrcella in the royal wheelhouse, and we must look our best." Sansa already looked her best. She brushed out her long auburn hair until it shone, and picked her nicest blue silks. She had been looking forward to today for more than a week. It was a great honor to ride with the Queen, and besides, Prince Joffrey might be there. It was thrust. Just thinking it made her feel a strange fluttering inside, even though they were not to marry for years and years. Sansa did not really know Joffrey yet, but she was already in love with him. He was all she ever dreamt a prince should be, tall and handsome and strong with hair like gold. She treasured every chance to spend with him, few as they were. The only thing that scared her about today was Ira. Ira had a way of ruining everything. She never knew what she should do. "I'll tell her," Sansa said uncertainly, "but she'll dress the way she always does." She hoped it wouldn't be too embarrassing. "May I be excused?" "You may." Scepter Mordin helped herself to more bread and honey, and Sansa slipped from the bench. The lady followed at her heels as she ran from the inn's common room. Outside she stood for a moment amidst the shouts and curses and the creak of wooden wheels as the men broke down the tents and pavilions and loaded the wagons for another day's march. The inn was a sprawling 3-story structure of pale stone, the biggest that Sansa had ever seen, but even so it had accommodations for less than a third of the king's party, which had swollen to more than 400 with the addition of her father's household and the free riders who had joined them on the road. She found Ira on the banks of the Trident, riding to hold Nymeria, still while she brushed dried mud from her fur. The dwarf was not enjoying the process. Ira was wearing the same riding leather as she had worn yesterday and the day before. "You'd better put on something pretty," Sansa told her. "Scepter Mordin said so. We're travelling in the Queen's wheelhouse with Princess Myrcella today." "I'm not," Ira said, trying to brush a tangle out of Nymeria's matted grey fur. "Mika and I are going to ride upstream and look for rubies at the ford." "Rubies?" Sansa said, lost. "What rubies?" Ira gave her a look as she was so stupid. "Rhaegar's rubies. This is where King Robert killed him and won the crown." Sansa regarded her scrawny little sister in disbelief. "You can't look for rubies. The princess is expecting us. The Queen invited us both." "I don't care," Ira said. "The wheelhouse doesn't even have windows. You can't see a thing." "What would you want to see?" Sansa said, annoyed. She had been thrilled by the invitation, and her stupid sister was going to ruin everything, just as she'd feared. "It's all just fields and farms and holdfast." "It is not," Ira said stubbornly. "If you came with us sometimes, you'd see. I hate riding," Sansa said fervently. "All it does is get you salt and dusty and sore." Ira shrugged. "Hold still," she snapped at Nymeria. "I'm not hurting you." Then to Sansa she said, "When we were crossing the neck, I counted 36 flowers I never saw before, and Mika shot me a lizard lion." Sansa shuddered. There had been 12 days crossing the neck, rumbling down a crooked causeway through an endless black bog, and she had hated every moment of it. The air had been damp and clammy, the causeway so narrow they could not even make proper camp at night. They had to stop right on the King's Road. Dense thickets of half-drowned trees pressed close around them, branches dripping with curtains of pale fungus. Huge flowers bloomed in the mud and floated in pools of stagnant water, but if you were stupid enough to leave the causeway to block them, There were quicksands waiting to suck you down, and snakes watching from trees, and lizard lions flouting, half submerged in the water, like black logs with eyes and teeth. None of which stopped Ira, of course. One day she came back grinning her horsey grin, her hair all tangled and her clothes covered in mud, clutching a raggedy bunch of purple and green flowers for father. Sansa kept hoping he would tell Ira to behave herself and act like the highborn lady she was supposed to be, but he never did. He only hugged her and thanked her for the flowers. They just made her worse. Then it turned out that the purple flowers were called poison kisses, and Ira got a rush on her arms. Sansa would have thought that might have taught her a lesson, but Ira laughed about it, and the next day she rubbed mud all over her arms like some ignorant bogwoman, just because her friend Mika told her it would stop the itching. She had bruises on her arms and shoulders too, dark purple welts and faded green and yellow splotches. Sansa had seen them when her sister undressed for sleep. How she'd gotten those only the 7 gods knew. Ira was still going on, brushing out Nymeria's tangles and chattering about things she'd seen on the trek south. Last week we found this haunted watchtower, and the day before we chased a herd of wild horses. You should have seen the run when they caught the scent of Nymeria. The wolf wriggled in her grasp, and Ira scolded her. Stop that! I have to do the other side. You're all muddy. You're not supposed to leave the column, Sansa reminded her. Father said so. Ira shrugged. I didn't go far, anyway. Nymeria was with me the whole time. I don't always go off either. Sometimes it's fun just to ride along with the wagons and talk to people. Sansa knew all about the sorts of people Ira liked to talk to. Squires and grooms and serving girls, old men and naked children, rough-spoken free riders of uncertain birth. Ira would make friends with anybody. This Mika was the worst. A butcher's boy, 13 and wild. He slept in the meat wagon and smelled of the slaughtering block. Just the sight of him was enough to make Sansa feel sick, but Ira seemed to prefer his company to hers. Sansa was running out of patience now. You have to come with me, she told her sister firmly. You can't refuse the queen. Septa Morden will expect you. Ira ignored her. She gave a hard yank with the brush. Nymeria growled and spun away, affronted. Come back here! There's going to be lemon cakes and tea, Sansa went on, all addled and reasonable. Lady brushed against her leg. Sansa scratched her eyes the way she liked, and Lady sat beside her on her haunches, watching Ira chase Nymeria. Why would you want to ride a smelly old horse and get all sore and sweaty when you could recline on feather pillows and eat cakes with the queen? I don't like the queen, Ira said casually. Sansa sucked in her breath, shocked that even Ira would say such a thing, but her sister prattled on heedless. She won't even let me bring Nymeria. She thrust the brush underneath her belt and stalked her wolf. Nymeria watched her approach warily. A royal wheelhouse is no place for a wolf, Sansa said. And Princess Myrcella is afraid of them, you know that. Myrcella is a little baby. Ira grabbed Nymeria around her neck, but the moment she pulled out the brush again, the direwolf wriggled free and boned it off. Frustrated, Ira threw down the brush. Bad wolf! She shouted. Sansa couldn't help but smile a little. The kennel master once told her that an animal takes after its master. She gave Lady a quick little hug. Lady licked her cheek. Sansa giggled. Ira heard and whirled around, glaring. I don't care what you said, I'm going out riding. Her long, horsey face got the stubborn look that meant she was going to do something willful. Gods be true, Ira, sometimes you act like such a child, Sansa said. I'll go by myself then. It will be ever so much nicer that way. Lady and I will eat all the lemon cakes, and you just have the best time without you. She turned to walk off, but Ira shouted after her, They won't let you bring Lady either. She was gone before Sansa could think of a reply, chasing Nymeria along the river. Alone and humiliated, Sansa took the long way back to the inn, where she knew Septa Morden would be waiting. Lady pattered quietly by her side. She was always in tears. All she wanted was for things to be nice and pretty, the way they were in the songs. Why couldn't Ira be sweet and delicate and kind like Princess Myrcella? She would have liked a sister like that. Sansa could never understand how 2 sisters, born only 2 years apart, could be so different. It would have been easier if Ira had been a bastard like the half-brother Jon. She even looked like Jon with the long face and brown hair of the Starks, nothing of their lady mother in her face or her colouring. And Jon's mother had been common, or so people whispered. Once she was littler. Sansa had even asked Mother if perhaps there hadn't been some mistake. Perhaps the Grumpkins had stolen her real sister. But Mother had only laughed and said no, Ira was her daughter and Sansa's true-born sister, blood of their blood. Sansa could not think why Mother would want to lie about it, so she supposed it had been true. As she neared the centre of camp, her distress was quickly forgotten. A crowd had gathered around the Queen's wheelhouse. Sansa heard excited voices buzzing like a hive of bees. The doors had been thrown open. She saw the Queen sit at the top of the wooden steps, smiling down at someone. She heard her saying, "The council does us great honour, my good lords." "What's happening?" she asked as quiet as she knew. "The council said riders from King's Landing to escort us the rest of the way," he told her. "An honour guard for the king." Anxious to see, Sansa let Lady clear a path through the crowd. People moved aside hastily for the direwolf. When she got closer, she saw 2 knights kneeling before the Queen, in armour so fine and gorgeous that it made her blink. One knight wore an incarnate suit of white enameled scales, brilliant as a field of new-fallen snow, with silver chasings and clasps that glittered in the sun. When he removed his helm, Sansa saw that he was an old man with hair as pale as his armour, yet he seemed strong and graceful for all that. From his shoulders hung the pure white cloak of the King's Guard. His companion was a man near 20, whose armour was steel-plate of a deep forest green. He was the handsomest man Sansa had ever set eyes upon, tall and powerfully made, with jet-black hair that fell to his shoulders and framed a clean-shaven face and laughing green eyes to match his armour. Cradled under one arm was an antlered helm, its magnificent rack shimmering in gold. At first Sansa did not notice the third stranger. He did not kneel with the others. He stood to one side beside the horses, a gaunt grim man who watched the proceedings in silence. His face was pockmarked and beardless, with deep-set eyes and hollow cheeks. Though he was not an old man, only a few wisps of hair remained to him, sprouting above his ears, but those he had grown long as a woman's. His armour was iron-grey chainmail over layers of boiled leather, plain and unadorned, and it spoke of age and hard use. Above his right shoulder the stained leather hilt of the blade strapped to his back was visible, a 2-handed greatsword, too long to be worn at his side. "The king has gone hunting, but I know he will be pleased to see you when he returns," the Queen was saying to the knights who knelt before her, but Sansa could take her eyes off the third man. He seemed to feel the weight of her gaze. Slowly he turned his head. Lady groaned. A terror as overwhelming as anything Sansa Stark had ever felt filled her suddenly. She stepped backward and bumped into someone. Strong hands grabbed her by the shoulders, and for a moment Sansa thought it was her father, but when she turned it was the burnt face of Senator Clegane looking down at her, his mouth twisting in terrible mockery of a smile. "You're shaking, girl," he said, his voice rasping. "Did I frighten you so much?" He did, and had since she had first laid eyes on the ruin that fire had made of his face, though it seemed to her that now that he was not half as terrifying as the other. Still, Sansa wrenched away from him. The hound laughed. A lady moved between them, rumbling a warning. Sansa dropped to her knees to wrap her arms around the wolf. They were all gathered around gaping. She could feel their eyes on her, and here and there she had muttered comments and titters of laughter. "A wolf," a man said, and someone else said, "7 hell to die, wolf," and the first man said, "What's it doing in camp?" And the hound's rasping voice replied, "The Starks use them for wet nurses." And Sansa realized that the 2 stranger knights were looking down on her and Lady, swords in their hands, and she was frightened again and ashamed. Tears filled her eyes. She heard the Queen say, "Joffrey, go to her," and their prince was there. "Leave her alone," Joffrey said. He stood over her, beautiful in blue and wool and black leather, his golden curls shining in the sun like a crown. He gave her his hand, drew her to her feet. "What is it, sweet lady? Why are you afraid? No one will hurt you. Put away your swords, all of you. The wolf is a little pet, that's all." He looked at Senator Clegane. "And you, dog, away with you. You're scaring my betrothed." The hound, ever faithful, bowed and stood away quietly through the press. Sansa struggled to steady herself. She felt like such a fool. She was a Stark of Winterfell, a noble lady, and some day she would be a queen. "It was not him, my sweet prince," she tried to explain. "It was the other one." The 2 stranger knights exchanged a look. "Pain?" chuckled the young man in grey armour. The other man in white spoke to Sansa gently. "Oftentimes Sir Elend frightens me as well, sweet lady. He has a fearsome aspect." As well he should. The Queen had descended from the wheelhouse. The spectators parted to make way for her. "If the weak do not fear the king's justice, you have to put the wrong man in the office." Sansa finally found her words. "Then surely you have chosen the right one, your grace," she said, and a gale of laughter erupted all around her. "Well spoken, child," said the old man in white, "as befits the daughter of Eddard Stark. I'm honoured to know you, however irregular the manner of our meeting. I'm Sir Barristan Stanley of the King's Guard. He bowed. Sansa knew the name, and now the courtesies that Septa Morden had taught her over the years came back to her. The Lord Commander of the King's Guard, she said, and Counsellor to Robert our King and to Aerys Targaryen before him. The honour is mine, good knight. Even in the far north the singers praise the deeds of Barristan the Bold. The Green Knight laughed again. Barristan the Old, you mean? Don't flatter him too sweetly, child. He thinks overmuch of himself already. He smiled at her. Now, wolf girl, if you can put a name to me as well, then I must concede that you are truly our Hand's daughter. Joffrey stiffened beside her. Have a care how you address my betrothed. I can answer, Sansa said quickly to quell her prince's anger. She smiled at the Green Knight. Your hammer bears golden antlers, my lord. The stag is the sigil of the royal house. King Robert has two brothers. By your extreme youth you can only be Renly Baratheon, Lord of Storm's End and Counsellor to the King, so I name you. Sir Barristan chuckled. By his extreme youth he can only be a prancing jackanapes, and so I name him. There was general laughter led by Lord Renly himself. The tension of a few moments ago was gone, and Sansa was beginning to feel comfortable, until Sir Ilan Payne shouldered two men aside and stood before her unsmiling. He did not say a word. Lady bared her teeth and began to growl, a low rumble full of menace, but this time Sansa silenced the wolf with a gentle hand to the head. I'm sorry I offended you, Sir Ilan, she said. She waited for an answer, but none came. As the headsman looked at her, his pale, colourless eyes seemed to strip the clothes away from her, and then the skin, leaving his soul naked before him. Still silent, he turned and walked away. Sansa did not understand. She looked at her prince. Did I say something wrong, your grace? Why will he not speak to me? Sir Ilan has not been feeling talk active these past 14 years, Lord Renly commented with a sly smile. Joffrey gave his uncle a look of poor loathing, then took Sansa's hand in his own. Aerys Targaryen had his tongue ripped out with hot pincers. He speaks most eloquently with his sword, however, the queen said, and his devotion to her realm is unquestioned. Then she smiled graciously and said, Sansa, the good counsellors and I must speak together until the king returns with your father. I fear we shall have to postpone your day with Myrcella. Please give your sweet sister my apologies. Joffrey, perhaps you would be so kind as to entertain our guest today. It would be my pleasure, mother, Joffrey said very formally. He took her by the arm and led her away from the wheelhouse, and Sansa's spirits took flight. A whole day with her prince. She gazed at Joffrey worshipfully. He was so gallant, she thought. The way he had rescued her from Sir Ilan and the Hound, why it was almost like the songs, like the time servant of the Mirror Shield saved the Princess Darius from the giants, or Prince Aemon the Dragonite championing Queen Aerys' honour against evil Sir Morgan's slanders. The touch of Joffrey's hand on his sleeve made her heart beat faster. What would you like to do? Be with you, Sansa thought, but she said, Whatever you like to do, my prince. Joffrey reflected a moment. We could go riding. Oh, I love riding, Sansa said. Joffrey glanced back at Lady, who was following at their heels. Your wolf is liable to frighten the horses, and my dog seems to frighten you. Let us leave them both behind instead of our own. What do you say? Sansa hesitated. If you like, she said uncertainly. I suppose I could tie Lady up. She didn't quite understand, though. I didn't know you had a dog. Joffrey laughed. He's my mother's dog, in truth. She has set him to guard me, and so he does. You mean the Hound, she said. She wanted to hit herself for being so slow. Her prince would never laugh her if she seemed stupid. Is it safe to leave him behind? Prince Joffrey looked annoyed that she would even ask. Have no fear, my lady. I am almost a man grown, and I don't fight with wood like your brothers. All I need is this. He drew his sword and showed it to her, a long sword adroitly shrunken to suit a boy of 12, gleaming blue steel, castle-forged and double-edged, with a leather grip and a lion's head pommel in gold. Sansa exclaimed over it admiringly, and Joffrey looked pleased. I call it lion's tooth, he said. And so they left her direwolf and his bodyguard behind them, while they ranged east along the north bank of the Trident with no company save Lion's Tooth. It was a glorious day, a magical day. The air was warm and heavy with the scent of flowers, and the woods here had a gentle beauty that Sansa had never seen in the north. Prince Joffrey's mind was a blood-bay courser, swift as the wind, and he rode it with reckless abandon, so fast that Sansa was hard-pressed to keep up on her mile. It was a day for adventures. They explored the caves by the river bank and tracked a shadow cat to its lair, and when they grew hungry, Joffrey found a holdfast by its smoke and told them to fetch food and wine for their prince and his lady. They dined on trout fresh from the river, and Sansa drank more wine than she had ever drunk before. "My father only lets us have 1 cup, and only at feast," she confessed to her prince. "My betrothed can drink as much as she wants," Joffrey said, refilling her cup. They went more slowly after they had eaten. Joffrey sang for her as they rode, his voice high and sweet and pure. Sansa was a little dizzy from the wine. "Shouldn't we be starting back?" she asked. "Soon," Joffrey said. "The battleground is right up ahead, where the river bends. That was where my father killed Rhaegar Targaryen, you know. He smashed in his chest, crunch, right through the armor." Joffrey swung an imaginary warhammer to show how it was done. "Then my uncle Jaime killed old Aerys, and my father was king. What's that sound?" Sansa heard it too, floating through the woods, a kind of wooden clattering, snack, snack, snack. "I don't know," she said. It made her nervous though. "Joffrey, let's go back." "I want to see what it is." Joffrey turned his horse in the direction of the sounds, and Sansa had no choice but to follow. The noises grew louder and more distinct, the clack of wood on wood, and as they grew closer, they heard heavy breathing as well, and now and then a grunt. "Someone's there," Sansa said anxiously. She found herself thinking of Lady, wishing the direwolf was with her. "You're safe with me." Joffrey drew his lion's tooth from its sheath. The sound of steel and leather made her tremble. "This way," he said, riding through a stand of trees. Beyond, in a clearing overlooking the river, they came upon a boy and a girl playing at knights. They swatted wooden sticks, broom handles from the look of them. They were rushing across the grass, swinging at each other lustily. The boy was years older, a head taller, much stronger, and he was pressing the attack. The girl, a scrawny thing in soiled leathers, was dodging and managing to get her stick in the way of most of the boy's blows, but not all. When she tried to lunge at him, he caught the stick with his own, swept it aside, and slid his wood down hard on her fingers. She cried out and lost her weapon. Prince Joffrey laughed. The book looked around, wide-eyed and startled, and dropped his stick in the grass. The girl glared at them, sucking on her knuckles to take the sting out, and Sansa was horrified. "Ira!" she called out incredulously. "Go away!" Ira shouted back at them, angry tears in her eyes. "What are you doing here? Leave us alone!" Joffrey glanced from Ira to Sansa and back again. "Your sister?" She nodded, blushing. Joffrey examined the boy, an ungainly lad with a coarse freckled face and thick red hair. "And who are you, boy?" he asked in a commanding tone that took no notice of the fact that the other was a year his senior. "Mika," the boy muttered. He recognized the prince and averted his eyes. "My lord." "He's the butcher's boy," Sansa said. "He's my friend," Ira said sharply. "You leave him alone." "A butcher's boy who wants to be a knight, is it?" Joffrey swung down from his mount, sword in hand. "Pick up your sword, butcher's boy," he said, his eyes bright with amusement. "Let us see how good you are." Mika stood there, frozen with fear. Joffrey walked toward him. "Go on, pick it up, or do you only fight little girls?" "She asked me to, my lord," Mika said. "She asked me to." Sansa had only to glance at Ira and see the flush on her sister's face to know the boy was telling the truth, but Joffrey was in no mood to listen. The wine had made him wild. "Are you going to pick up your sword?" Mika shook his head. "It's only a stick, my lord. It's not no sword, it's only a stick." "And you're only a butcher's boy, no knight." Joffrey lifted down his tooth and laid its point on Mika's cheek below the eye, as the butcher's boy stood trembling. "That was my lady's sister you were hitting. Do you know that?" A bright bud of blood blossomed where his sword pressed into Mika's flesh, and a slow red line trickled down the boy's cheek. "Stop it!" Ira screamed. She grabbed up a fallen stick. Sansa was afraid. "Ira, you stay out of this." "I won't hurt him. Much." Prince Joffrey told Ira, never taking his eyes off the butcher's boy. Ira went for him. Sansa slid off her mare, but she was too slow. Ira swung with both hands. There was a loud crack as the wood split against the back of the prince's head, and then everything happened at once before Sansa's horrified eyes. Joffrey staggered and whirled around, roaring curses. Mika ran for the trees as fast as his legs would take him. Ira swung at the prince again, but this time Joffrey caught the blown lion's tooth and sent a broken stick flying from her hands. The back of his head was all bloody and his eyes were on fire. Sansa was shrieking, "No, stop it, both of you, you're spoiling it!" But no one was listening. Ira scooped up the rock and hurled it at Joffrey's head. She hit his horse instead, and the blood bay reared and went galloping off after Mika. "Stop it! Don't! Stop Stop it! Sansa screamed. Joffrey slashed at Arya with his sword, screaming obscenities, terrible words, filthy words. Arya darted back, frightened now, but Joffrey followed, hounding her toward the woods, backing her up against a tree. Sansa didn't know what to do. She watched helplessly, almost blind from her tears. Then a grey blur flashed past her, and suddenly Nymeria was there, leaping, jaws closing around Joffrey's sword arm. The steel frayed from his fingers as the wolf knocked him off his feet, and they rolled in the grass, the wolf snarling, ripping at him, the prince shrieking in pain. "Get it off!" he screamed. "Get it off!" Arya's voice cracked like a whip. "Nymeria!" The direwolf let go of Joffrey and moved to Arya's side. The prince lay in the grass, whimpering, treadling his mangled arm. His shirt was soaked in blood. Arya said, "She didn't hurt you." "Much." She picked up Lion's Tooth where it had fallen and stood over him, holding the sword with both hands. Joffrey made a scared whimpery sound as he looked up at her. "No," he said. "Don't hurt me. I'll tell my mother." "You leave him alone!" Sansa screamed at her sister. Arya whirled and heaved the sword into the air, putting her whole body into the throw. The blue steel flashed in the sun as the sword spun out over the river, into the water and vanished with a splash. Joffrey moaned. Arya ran after her horse, Nymeria loping at her heels. After they had gone, Sansa went to Prince Joffrey. His eyes were closed in pain. His breath racked. Sansa knelt beside him. "Joffrey," she sobbed. "Oh, look what they did! Look what they did! My poor prince, don't be afraid. I'll ride to the holdfast and bring help for you." Tenderly she reached out and brushed back his soft blonde hair. His eyes snapped open and looked at her, and there was nothing but loathing there, nothing but the vilest contempt. "Then go," he spit at her, "and don't touch me."